Now, a group of lawyers have launched legal proceedings at the International Criminal Court. They're calling for the European Union and member states to be prosecuted for the deaths of thousands of migrants who've drowned in the Mediterranean Sea off Libya. They claim more than 14,000 migrants died or were reported missing between 2014 and 2017, including 1,200 in just 1 week in April 2015. It also says 40,000 were sent back to militia-controlled camps in Libya. Well, the lawyers blame the EU's deterrence-based migration policy, which cut back sea rescues. That policy replaced a special Italian mission known as Mare Nostrum. Well, Natasha Bertrand, for the EU's spokesman for migration and home affairs, was speaking about these allegations just last week. Let's listen.
You'll remember that when the Juncker Commission took office, we said very clearly, and the President himself said in his 2015 State of the Union address, that ending the Italian naval operation Mare Nostrum was a mistake. And we sought to correct this by immediately tripling the EU's rescue capacity in the Mediterranean in 2015. It is not the EU's policy that is causing these tragedies. It is the cruel and dangerous business model used by traffickers and smugglers, exploiting human misery and putting people's lives at risk.
Well, joining me now is one of the authors of this legal submission, the lawyer Juan Branco. Thank you so much for being here on the programme. Why don't we start by you telling me and our viewers, what are the legal planks you're basing this prosecution on?
We're showing that crimes against humanity were willfully committed by the European Union leaders with the objective to deter individuals to cross the Mediterranean. What we show is that this policy was implemented through the execution of a plan that was prepared and that was willingly executed that triggered the death of 14,000 people. What we try to show is that there was consciousness that the decisions that were taken by the EU would trigger these deaths and that therefore they could be qualified, criminally speaking, and could be brought to the ICC.
I mean, your submission says, and I'm quoting, the EU intended to sacrifice the lives of migrants in distress at sea with the sole objective of dissuading others seeking safe haven in Europe. Are you actually saying that officials, people sat down and decided people should die in these circumstances? So what is your evidence for that?
Yeah, so this investigation was brought on for 2 years by a team of lawyers, led by Omer Schatz, and we rely on a lot of internal documents from Frontex, leaked by WikiLeaks from a few others, public documents produced by the European Union, by international organizations, by the UN, the Commissariat for Refugees, and they all show a pattern which was of systematic behavior, which was to lead to the death of these people, and more importantly, there was previous consciousness that the actions of the EU would trigger these deaths. So when the European spokesperson affirms that there was a mistake, first she acknowledges implication of the EU in this situation. So the minimum for the International Criminal Court should be to open an investigation to define whether it is true that it was a mistake only or if there was intent. What we show in our document, in this 250 pages investigation, is that there was a clear consciousness that this would trigger the deaths that we're talking about.
And your legal submission also goes on to talk about the camps in Libya and the terrible conditions there. Yes. Isn't the truth of it, though, that actually, as we heard there from the EU, the people really at the centre of this who are to blame are the people, smugglers, the traffickers? They're the people. The EU and those member countries were simply grappling with the most enormous situation that was fluid and changing quite a lot of the time.
It would be quite ironic to think that a powerful system of power as the European Union would be enabled to fight against a few smugglers. What is really going on is the creation of an entity which is called the Libyan Coast Guard, which was meant to intercept the migrants when they were trying to leave from Libya in order to avoid them crossing the Mediterranean and therefore falling into the responsibility of the European Union, which would have forced the EU to take care of them. So they recreated this organization, the Libyan Coast Guard, that they funded, that they formed, to which they gave means to act. And this criminal organization, which has been qualified as such by a lot of international organizations. I mean, heads of this organization are in the sanctioned list of the UN Security Council, where this organization worked as a proxy in order to implement the policy that the EU had triggered, and these thousands of interceptions of migrants brought them to detention camps where they would be tortured, executed, etc. And this has been done in consciousness by the EU. I mean, the EU knew perfectly well with whom it was allying, but they looked for political gain, they looked for scapegoats, they looked to leave these populations behind, and now they will have to face, in our opinion, the consequences of that, which means criminal consequences.
Just briefly and finally, the EU spokesman we were just playing that clip from also went on to say the EU had helped rescue 730,000 people since 2015, with the numbers of people dying declining significantly. Would you take issue with that in terms of her assessment of how they have handled the situation?
This number is baseless. We have asked the EU for explanation, and they were completely unable to give us a cutout of where it came from. What we suspect is that this number includes by far all the people who are intercepted by the Libyan Coast Guard and others and brought back to detention camps. So it's not people who are saved, it's people who are, and I'm quoting here, high-level responsibles from the EU, who are being sent back to hell, because hell is how you could describe today detention camps in Libya.
Juan Branco, we have to leave it there, but thank you very much for taking time to speak to us live from Paris. Thank you.